the Buddha rejects this as well. Okay, then we come to the fourth case. This is the case of the person who observes the moral precepts, engages in good conduct, but tough luck, he's reborn in a bad destination. Okay, then some ascetic observes this, and when that ascetic makes the claim, there is no such thing as good karma, there's no karmic result of good conduct. So when a person actually denies the working of the law of karma, the Buddha says, I do not grant him this. He rejects that assertion. Okay, but when the person says, he's objecting, but I saw for myself that there was this person who observed the moral precepts, and look what happened to him. He fell down from the human world, even was reborn in the hell world. So he says, that's what I saw for myself. And the Buddha says, I admit it. You did see that. I grant you that. But now when the person draws the generalization, he says, on the dissolution of the body after death, everyone who abstains from killing living beings and so forth will be reborn in a state of misery and a bad destination. The Buddha says, I do not grant that. He rejects the generalization. And then again, when the person says, those who know thus know rightly, this is the right view, the Buddha rejects this. And when he adheres to this and insists, only this is true, anything else is false, again the Buddha rejects that kind of obstinate clinging to the view. Okay, so we've gone now through what I call the third major section of the sutta, the Buddha's assessment or evaluation of the four inferences. And so far we haven't yet come to the actual great exposition of karma, which is actually, though it's called the Great Exposition, but it's actually a relatively short section in the sutta. But that is what comes in from sections 17 to 20. So here the Buddha is going to give the explanation of why these seeming regularities take place and why these irregularities or exceptions or these outcomes that are contrary to expectation, why those take place. Okay, so he takes each case of action in turn. So we have the case of a person who kills living beings, steals, commits sexual misconduct, and so on. Then, with the breakup of the body after death, he's reborn in a bad destination. So the explanation, it seems to me something is missing from the sutta. But first let me read what the sutta says. Either earlier he did an evil action to be felt as painful, or later he did an evil action to be felt as painful, or at the time of death he acquired and adopted a wrong view. Because of that, on the dissolution of the body after death, he has been reborn in a bad destination, even in hell. Okay, why I say something seems to be missing here is that the explanation why this person is reborn in the bad destination is said either earlier he did an evil action to be felt as painful. That seems to be saying he did some evil action maybe in a past life, or maybe earlier in life, before he engaged in this misconduct, that the ascetic was observing, that could be responsible for his rebirth in the bad destination. Or he did some evil action later, that is after the bad deeds that the ascetic was observing, so that those later bad deeds could have been the cause for the rebirth in hell. Or at the time of death, he adopted a wrong view, maybe a view that said that there's no result of good and bad deeds. So what seems to be missing here is the simple claim that it was the bad deeds that the ascetic observed for himself that were the cause for his rebirth in hell. When the ascetic sees him as a human being killing, stealing, hears him telling lies and so forth, then later sees him reborn in hell, it could be that those evil actions that the ascetic observed could be the cause for rebirth in hell. So it seems here, that's why in the outline, I added in brackets, I said, somebody violates the moral principles and is reborn in destination. So I added, one may have been reborn in the bad destination because of one's moral transgression, that is the actual transgression that the ascetic observed for himself. Or one might have been reborn in the bad destination because of earlier misconduct, or because of later misconduct, or because one adopts a wrong view at the time of death. Okay, but then the Buddha adds a final sentence to the statement, extremely important. He says, since he has here killed living beings and done other unwholesome things, he will experience the result of that either here and now, or in his next existence, his next rebirth, or in some subsequent existence, some existence after the next one. So the point here is that one doesn't escape the bad deeds one has done. So suppose one has told a lot of lies, committed sexual misconduct, and killed living beings. Okay, maybe the karma that causes one to be reborn in a bad destination is the karma of killing living beings. But if the person has also stole and told a lot of lies, particularly lies that injure others, that person won't escape the result of those karmas, but those karmas also will produce their result, perhaps in this life, perhaps in the next life, or even in some subsequent life. This becomes clearer when we have karmas working in contrary directions, like in the next case. Let me go through the whole thing before I ask for questions, because we have to get it all as a whole. Okay, now we have case number 2. So here we have the person who commits moral transgressions, killing, stealing, and so on. On the dissolution of the body after death, he's reborn in a happy destination, even in the heavenly world. So why did he get reborn in the heavenly world? Here the answer is straightforward. Either he did some good actions, either earlier he did some good actions that will have pleasant results, or later, after the misconduct, he did good actions, or at the time of death, he acquired a right view. Okay, so because of that, with the breakup of the body after death, he has reappeared in a good destination, even in the heavenly world. Okay, so the ascetic just saw him committing unwholesome actions, then taking rebirth in heaven, and came to the conclusion that the unwholesome actions, that even though he did unwholesome actions, since he was reborn in heaven, then our actions have nothing to do with our rebirth. But here the Buddha gives the explanation that what led to the rebirth in heaven had to be, or a happy destination, had to be some wholesome karma, some good karma that he did, not the moral transgressions. So it could have been earlier good karma, later good karma, or taking up right view. So because of that, he has been reborn in a happy destination, even in the heavenly world. But here comes the big qualifications. Because he has killed living beings and committed other bad deeds, he will experience the result of that either here and now in this life itself, in the next existence, or in some subsequent existence. So even though one, because of some good deeds that one has done, one is reborn in a happy destination, if one has committed the moral transgressions, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and so forth, one doesn't escape the results. Those results catch up. So that is the second case. The third case, this is that of the person who engages in wholesome conduct, observes the moral principles, and then he's reborn in a happy destination. Again, in this case, it seems that a phrase is missing, because the Buddha says, the explanation, either earlier he did some good action to be experienced as pleasant, or later he did some good action to be experienced as pleasant, or at the time of death he adopted a right view. So here it seems to be omitting the case where the good actions that the ascetic observed could be the cause for his rebirth in the happy destination. So in my outline, I added the case, this is number 3, that somebody observes moral principles and is reborn in a good destination. So this person might have been reborn in the good destination because of the good conduct that was actually observed by the ascetic who makes these claims about him. Or it could have been some other good conduct that he performed earlier, either in a previous life or earlier in this life, or later, subsequent to the good conduct that the ascetic observed, or he might have adopted a right view at the time of death. So for any of these reasons, he has been reborn in a good destination, and since here he has been observing these moral principles, he will experience the result of that either in this life, in the next life, or in some subsequent life. The good karma, in other words, isn't lost, even though it might not be the karma that produces rebirth, but that karma always has the potential to ripen in one of these ways. Okay, then we have the fourth case. Here we have the person who abstains from killing, observes all of the other precepts and moral principles, but he is reborn in a bad destination, even in hell. So the explanation the Buddha gives about this, because this is contrary to expectation, contrary to the normal understanding of the working of karma. So the Buddha says, why was he reborn in a bad destination? Either earlier he did some unwholesome action, or later, subsequent to his good deeds, he did some unwholesome action, or at the time of death, he adopted a wrong view. So because of that, on the dissolution of the body after death, he has been reborn in a state, a bad destination, even in hell. Okay, but since he's observed the moral principles, abstaining from taking life and so forth, he will experience the result of that either here and now, in his next existence, or in some subsequent existence. Are you following all of this? Does it make good sense? Excuse me?
This is very helpful, the way you put it here.
Yeah, the outline. Yeah, I think it helps. Okay, there's just one little bit of the exposition. It's a rather puzzling statement in the original, and if I remember, the commentary I wasn't so satisfied with the commentary's explanation. And it's strange that the Buddha just makes a statement without giving a more detailed explanation. It's sort of like he sets up an outline without filling in the outline. So he says, this is paragraph 21, he says, thus, Ananda, there is action that is incapable and appears incapable. For those of you who are studying Pali, the word here is, the contrast is Baba and Baba. In Sanskrit, it's Bhavya. Okay, so there's action that's incapable and appears incapable, action that is incapable and appears capable, action that is capable and appears capable, action that is capable and appears incapable. Last night as I was preparing this, I was really puzzled by this, and I was thinking, I have to give an explanation of it tomorrow. First I couldn't figure it out. Am I just going to fake my way through it? Or just drop it and say, there's one more paragraph in the sutta, time for lunch. But then as I was reflecting on it, I saw that it actually ties in perfectly with the previous part of the sutta. And so then I filled in my own great exposition of karma. So if you read the sutta without having heard Bhikkhu Bodhi's great exposition of karma, then you might not be able to figure out that last paragraph. Okay, so this is the way I interpreted it. So and if you have a different interpretation, don't hesitate to present it. So we have first karma that is incapable and appears incapable. So I say that this is bad karma that is incapable of producing a good rebirth, and it appears incapable of producing a good rebirth. That's one case. So this is the case when the evildoer person does bad actions, and then he's seen to be reborn in a bad destination. So by its nature, bad karma is incapable of producing a good result, incapable of producing a rebirth in a heaven. And to the ascetic who's seeing this person be reborn in a bad destination, it appears incapable of producing a good rebirth. So this is the case when the evildoer is seen to be reborn in a bad destination. And then the second example of this, the converse example, this is good karma is incapable, good karma which is good karma is incapable of producing a bad rebirth, and to the ascetic, it appears incapable of producing a bad rebirth. This is the case when the ascetic sees the doer of good being reborn in a good destination. Does that seem reasonable? Follow the explanation? Okay, the next one is more interesting, perhaps. So this is karma that is incapable and appears capable. Okay, so I took the two examples of this. We have bad karma is incapable of producing a good rebirth. But when some other good karma overtakes it, overpowers it, then the person is reborn in a happy destination, then the bad karma appears capable of producing a good rebirth. So this is the case when the evildoer is seen to be reborn in a good destination. I think it's appropriate to ask questions when I ask for questions, because I really want to run through this. There'll be a period for questions. Well, I don't know. I think it'll have to be after lunch. Okay, then the converse is good karma is incapable of producing a bad rebirth, but when some other unwholesome karma comes up and overtakes it, then the good karma appears capable of producing a bad rebirth. So this is the case when the ascetic sees a virtuous person reborn in a bad destination. So the good karma is incapable of producing a bad rebirth, but it appears capable of doing so. Okay, then the third, we have karma that is capable and appears capable. So here we have bad karma that is capable of producing a bad rebirth, and it appears capable of producing a bad rebirth. This is the case when the evildoer is seen to be reborn in a bad destination. So this is the quite natural conclusion. Then there's the good karma, which is capable of producing a good rebirth, and it appears capable of producing a good rebirth. That's the case when the ascetic sees the virtuous person reborn in a good destination. Then there's karma that is capable and appears incapable. So bad karma, I have the two cases. Bad karma is capable of producing a bad rebirth. But when that karma is overpowered by a good karma, so the person is reborn in heaven, then it appears incapable of producing a bad rebirth. So this is the case when the evildoer is seen to be reborn in a good destination. And then we have the converse. Good karma is capable of producing a good rebirth, but when it is overpowered by a bad karma, it appears incapable of producing a good rebirth. So this is the case when the virtuous person is seen to be reborn in a bad destination. Does all this seem clear? Anybody have any questions? Please, if you have a question, let's take the microphone so it will get recorded.
When you say when good karma overtakes it or bad karma overtakes it, that seems, I don't agree with that, because the Buddha says he will experience the results of that either here or now, or in the next rebirth, or in some subsequent
Please put
existence, or in some subsequent existence. So I don't know how you could say it's overtaken. You're going to suffer.
Okay, it's a good point. But what is meant here by, say, a good karma overtaking a bad karma is that the good karma overtakes the bad karma in the role of generating rebirth. I think in an earlier class, I think it was before, when I was explaining Sutta number 135, I explained that there are 4 functions of karma. The 4 functions, I see Johnny is nodding his head, so he remembers, was one is called the productive or generative function. That is the function of producing the rebirth. A second function is supportive karma. That is karma which brings beneficial or helpful results in the course of life. Third is the obstructive karma. That is karma which creates a lot of obstacles, hardships, difficulties in the course of life. And then fourth is the destructive karma, one karma that comes up in the middle of life and causes a premature end to the lifespan. Okay, so the person, say, who performs good deeds, but then when I say a bad karma overtakes it, that means that some bad deed that person has committed, either earlier, later, even from a previous life, somehow it comes up and it takes on the productive function, the role of generating rebirth. But the person doesn't escape the other karmas that they've done, because those karmas, they always remain till they produce their result. And so that karma can mature in the course of a life, or the karma can remain and produce rebirth into some future life, some later life. So it's not lost. Did you have please take the microphone.
Well, I do understand the sutta. It's just that, to me, misconception I had was, before these suttas, is that...
Wait, I think we have to wait a moment.
Yeah. Yeah, well, after the suttas, I understand now that even through in the Abhidhamma class, I did not understand this until now, that it doesn't matter what you do in this life. If there's previous lives where you have killed someone or done bad deeds, you're still not going to be born. There's a waste of time now. But not that it's a waste of time. You're creating good karma, but you're actually generating to repay past deeds in many lives, or maybe past life.
Did you say that there's no point in doing good?
Oh, no, I don't mean to say, I meant it as a joke. I didn't mean it literally. I meant to say that most people would actually think that they're going to go to heaven when in reality they're not. Most likely not, I would say, since they have created bad deeds in the past life or killed people.
Well, the thing is that I would say that the good deeds that one does in the present life maybe tend to have more power in determining one's destiny than deeds from previous lives, because they're fresher and closer.
But not necessarily, as the Buddha states, you're going to be reborn in a heavenly. You may be reborn in hell. So.
Well, still, one should always do the wholesome.
Oh no, I don't mean I'm going to stop. Of course,
yeah.
I'm just saying I had the misconception that I'm thinking this life will produce good deeds and eventually you move on to, heavenly, life. But actually, it's not the case.
Yeah.
As I'm sure many of us already understand that. But
yeah. I think we'll have to stop now, and then we'll come back. Let us say 12:15 for discussion and questions and answers. I'm sorry I didn't leave more time today for questions, but I think to really understand the sutta, you have to come to the whole thing, and it came right up to the end of the class. Okay, so we end with sharing the merits. Okay, so everybody has the sharing the merit sheet. So we share the merits with the devas, the Dharma protecting deities, the bhutas or the fair spirits, the nagas or dragon spirits, and with all beings. Akasata chabhumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanang akasata chabumata devanagamahdika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanang akasata chabumata devanagamahdika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanam akasata chabumata. Did I do? I'm sorry, my mind is. Did I do 3? I did 3. Okay, okay. I know. No. It's like finishing the evening meditation. Which door did I leave my shoes? Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe devanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe bhutanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe satanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Bhavagupadaya vichihetato etantare satakayupapanna rupeya rupicha asanya sannino dukkha pamuchantu pusantu nibbutting. Okay, we'll end with 3 half bows. The Buddha.